Usually when you buy something, there is this comforting expectation of like a fixed reality. It is like buying a carton of milk at the grocery store.
Right. You just walk in and grab it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You look at the dairy shelf, the little tag says $3.49. You
Yeah.
put it in your cart and you are done. I mean, the milk doesn't suddenly cost $6 because the person behind you also wants milk.
That would be a completely chaotic grocery trip. It is a clean, simple transaction. You see the number, you pay the number, and you go home.
But then you step into the world of booking airfare,
Hmm?
and suddenly that simple, rational transaction is it's gone.
Completely out the window.
Yeah. You are looking at a pricing landscape that feels significantly less like a neighborhood grocery store and way more like a high-stakes casino floor.
Oh, for sure.
The rules seem to change every single time you refresh your browser. The prices fluctuate wildly based on these invisible metrics. And honestly, you almost always feel like the house is winning.
Because it is the absolute definition of a moving target. And, the anxiety of hovering your mouse over that buy button, wondering if you should pull the trigger now or wait 12 hours to see if it drops, is something every single traveler knows intimately.
Oh, the refresh panic. I know it well.
Right. It's an emotional purchase disguised as a logistical one.
It really is. You're playing against the house. But on today's deep dive, we're giving you the house's playbook.
Exactly.
Whether you are planning a massive summer vacation for the whole family, or you just need to jump on a quick business trip next month, you have undoubtedly felt the sting of volatile flight prices lately.
Especially this year.
Yeah, so today our mission is to bypass all that overwhelming, stress-inducing noise. We're going to crack the code on airfare pricing using an incredibly detailed source we have in front of us. It's called Mastering the 2026 Skies, the Goldilocks Window Flight Guide. And we're combining that with the absolute latest 2026 travel data.
Which is packed with some really surprising numbers.
It is. We are going to give you a data-driven shortcut to scoring the best deals without the endless stress.
And importantly, we aren't just going to give you like a rigid list of times to book. We are going to explain the underlying mechanics of why these specific booking windows actually exist.
Right. The why behind the what.
Exactly. Once you understand the engine running the algorithm, you stop just guessing at the numbers and start navigating the system strategically.
I love that approach because airfare pricing really is a high-stakes puzzle, and today we are finally going to solve it. To do that, we need to start by looking at the broad timeline of booking.
The macro view.
Right. Before we can pick the exact day or the exact hour to buy a ticket, we have to know the right season to start looking. Okay, let's unpack this. The data outlines something called the Goldilocks window.
A sweet spot.
Yeah. For domestic flights, this is generally 1 to 3 months out.
Okay.
But if you want the absolute mathematical sweet spot, you're looking at 34 to 86 days before departure.
Which is a fascinating metric because it directly challenges the old conventional wisdom that booking a year in advance guarantees the best price.
People still do that.
They do. People still heavily believe that if they book their Thanksgiving flights in January, they are somehow outsmarting everyone.
They aren't. I mean, the data makes a huge point about this specific danger zone. You want to actively avoid booking more than 180 days out because it is almost always more expensive.
Much more expensive.
We were talking about this earlier, and I just kept thinking that booking 180 days out is basically like showing up to a dinner party while the host is still vacuuming the living room.
Yes.
You're
Right.
standing there with a bottle of wine, the Dyson is running. They just aren't ready for you. The airlines haven't finalized their pricing algorithms yet, so they're going to charge you a massive premium just to make you go away.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
To understand the mechanics of why that happens, you really have to look at how airlines manage their inventory, which is a system known as yield management.
Yield management.
Right. When a flight first opens up in the computer system, which is usually about 11 months out, the airline has zero real-world data on how popular that specific flight on that specific Tuesday will actually be.
It's just a blank slate.
Exactly. So they set a conservative, relatively high baseline price. They are perfectly happy to let the hyper planners, the people who absolutely must have seat 4A and are willing to pay a premium for the peace of mind, just buy those expensive early seats.
Wait, let me challenge that for a second. What about the ultra-low-cost carriers? Do the budget airlines follow that same vacuuming the living room rule, or are they just trying to grab my cash as early as humanly possible to lock in the route?
That's a great question. The curve is a bit steeper for budget carriers, but the underlying principle still absolutely holds true. Even a low-cost carrier needs to gauge baseline demand before they start discounting.
Really?
Oh, yeah. As the departure date approaches and we enter that 34 to 86-day Goldilocks window, the airline's algorithm stops guessing and starts predicting the actual demand based on real-time clicks and historical data. Ah, so they adjust.
Right, they intentionally drop the prices into that sweet spot to ensure the plane actually fills up.
Which brings up a very interesting wrinkle in the recent data from Expedia. They found that for domestic flights, there is actually an even tighter window of 15 to 30 days out that can yield roughly $130 in savings compared to booking 6 or more months early.
It's wild.
Now, speaking from personal experience, waiting until a month before a family trip to book flights feels absolutely terrifying.
It does. It goes against all our instincts.
But the data says it pays off.
It feels incredibly counterintuitive, but it's just the algorithm finalizing its work. The airline is just trying to capture the vast majority of the leisure travelers right before the final phase of pricing kicks in.
No, we need to specify that international flights operate on a completely stretched out timeline. You can't use the 30-day rule there.
No, absolutely not.
The international Goldilocks window is 2 to 8 months out, and the guide points out that it varies heavily by region.
Very happy. Like, if you are heading to Europe, they recommend booking 3 to 5 months ahead. But if you are flying to Asia or Oceania, you need to plan much further ahead, roughly 5 to 7 months out.
Right, because the sheer logistics of international travel require a longer runway. It's not just the traveler needing more time to arrange visas and hotels. It's the airlines balancing their global routing and partner carrier agreements.
Okay, but let's talk about the procrastinators.
Oh, boy.
The folks who wait until the very last second. The guide mentions that occasionally taking a last-minute gamble and booking just 8 to 14 days before departure can save you up to $200 to $25.
It happens.
How does that mechanically work? Why would they suddenly slash the price that late in the game?
It comes down to a concept called load factor. You will hear airlines talk about this constantly.
Load factor.
Okay. Yeah, load factor simply means the percentage of available seats that are filled with paying passengers. Airlines need to keep their load factors high, meaning they just need to ensure the percentage of occupied seats stays profitable. Because flying a half-empty plane costs them almost as much in jet fuel and crew salaries as flying a completely full one.
That makes sense. The plane has to fly anyway.
Exactly. So if a flight reaches that 8 to 14-day mark and hasn't sold as expected, the algorithm panics slightly. It drops the price drastically just to put bodies in seats and offset those fuel costs.
But that has to be a massive gamble for the traveler. Right.
A gigantic gamble, because if that flight is even remotely full, once you cross into that final week, you usually hit the panic buying phase.
Oh, the business travelers.
You nailed it. That is when the business travelers who aren't paying with their own money and need to travel immediately for a client meeting enter the market. The algorithm knows corporate cards are swiping, and it just drives the prices through the roof.
All right, so if I know I need to book my domestic flight roughly 2 months out to hit that Goldilocks window, but if I am staring at the calendar in that window, I'm still paralyzed.
Sure, there are a lot of days in 2 months.
Exactly. Does it matter if I click buy on a Monday morning versus a Friday night? We need the micro-strategy here.
Let's break it down.
According to the data, January is your best bet for the cheapest domestic flights, entirely due to that massive post-holiday drop in demand. Like, nobody wants to fly in late January.
Right, everyone is recovering from December.
But if you are going international, August is actually the most budget-friendly month, with fares averaging 29% lower than in December.
That 29% drop is incredibly significant.
Huge.
Think about the global shift in travel patterns in late August. Summer vacations are ending, families are preparing for the school year, and corporate travel hasn't fully ramped back up from the summer slump yet.
It's a weird middle ground.
Exactly. So the airlines have to heavily incentivize travel to keep those load factors high during that awkward transition period.
And when you are literally sitting at your computer, the time of day matters too. The sources say evening bookings, specifically between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., yield better deals than morning bookings.
Yes.
And if you are willing to suffer just a little bit, early morning departures before 6:00 a.m. or late night red-eyes offer the lowest fares. Plus, the data notes, they actually have the highest on-time arrival rates.
The on-time arrival statistic is crucial, and it makes complete logical sense.
How so?
Well, when you take a 6:00 a.m. flight, the plane has been sitting at the gate all night. It hasn't been affected by the cascading delays that build up throughout the day. When a thunderstorm grounds flights in Atlanta at noon, it ripples across the entire country by 4 p.m.
Ooh, I have absolutely lived that nightmare, sitting at O'Hare for a 4 p.m. flight that keeps getting pushed because the plane is stuck in Denver.
We all have.
The 6 a.m. flight avoids all of that.
Precisely. You pay less financially, and you pay less in terms of your own sanity because you are actually more likely to arrive on schedule.
I need to stop you right here, though. I highlighted this in my notes because the data we are looking at completely contradicts itself on a massive rule, and it makes zero sense to me.
Ah, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right. Traditional wisdom, and honestly, what every travel blog has said for the last decade, is that Tuesdays and Wednesdays are the cheapest days to fly. And the guide we have confirms they're often 15 to 25% cheaper than weekend flights.
That's the old standby rule.
But then we look at the recent 2026 reports from Expedia, and they identify Friday as the cheapest day to both book and fly.
Yeah.
Historically, Sunday was the low-cost booking day. So how is a listener supposed to handle this contradiction? Do we trust the historic Tuesday rule, or do we bet on this new 2026 Friday data?
What's fascinating here is how quickly macroeconomic shifts can completely rewrite the fundamental rules of an industry.
Because it's completely flipped.
You are absolutely right to call out that contradiction because it is glaring. Let's look at the mechanics. Historically, business travelers flew out on Monday morning and flew home on Thursday evening or Friday morning. So Tuesday and Wednesday were the absolute dead zones for airlines, which made them cheap. And Sunday was the quiet day to book because the corporate travel agents weren't at their desks booking those Monday flights.
Okay, so what broke the system in 2026 to make Friday the cheap day?
It is the continued evolution of how we actually work. With hybrid schedules and remote work completely entrenched in the 2026 corporate culture, the rigid boundaries between weekend leisure travel and weekday business travel have dissolved.
Oh, that makes sense.
People are flying out on a Thursday evening, working remotely from their hotel on Friday and making a long weekend out of it, or they're flying home on Sunday instead of Friday. This has completely shifted the demand curves. The algorithm is constantly trying to adjust to the fact that Friday is no longer strictly a premium day for corporate returns.
So the Friday data isn't a glitch in the Expedia report. It's a reflection of how we are living right now.
Exactly.
Which means, as a listener, you shouldn't view Tuesday or Friday as a strict, unbreakable law. You should use this shifting landscape to your advantage. If Friday is suddenly cheaper because the algorithm is confused by remote workers, use that flexibility.
Exactly. The algorithm is learning our new habits, and we have to learn with it.
Hold on, though. We just spent 20 minutes mapping out these perfect little algorithmic sweet spots and Goldilocks windows.
We did.
But looking at this 2026 travel data, I'm seeing a massive red flag.
Yeah, the inflation data.
Here is the April 2026 reality check. Airline fares have risen approximately 14.9% year over year.
A substantial jump.
Massive. And the stated cause in the research, a 19.2% surge in gas prices.
Right.
Because of these rising costs, the experts in the guide are officially declaring an exception to the Goldilocks rule. They advise booking summer and holiday travel as soon as possible to avoid further price hikes because inventory is dropping incredibly fast.
That's the reality of the market right now.
If you are looking at Thanksgiving and Christmas, the absolute best prices are found in October and strictly no later than Halloween.
The Halloween deadline is an incredibly useful anchor point. It's the absolute last moment before the holiday panic truly sets in and the algorithms take advantage of the desperation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Does this 14.9% fare hike essentially kill the Goldilocks window for summer 2026? Think about it. If fuel prices are up almost 20%, the airlines are bleeding money. Fares are only trending up. Isn't waiting around for a magical 34-day algorithmic drop just a fool's errand right now?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
you are hitting on the central tension of airfare pricing right now.
Right, because it feels broken.
Well, the Goldilocks window we outline is a model based on baseline demand. It assumes a relatively stable economic environment where the only real variable is how quickly the seats on the plane fill up. But when you introduce a massive macroeconomic shock like a 19% fuel spike, that stable environment shatters completely.
Because fuel isn't a fixed cost like the airplane itself. They have to pay for that fuel for every single flight, and they are passing the cost directly to us.
Precisely. Airlines operate on notoriously razor-thin margins. When jet fuel, which is one of their largest operational costs alongside labor, spikes by nearly a fifth, They cannot afford to play the waiting game with their algorithms.
They just have to charge more.
They have to raise the baseline prices across the board immediately to protect their margins. So in this specific 2026 environment, securing a baseline price right now heavily outweighs the potential of a small algorithmic drop later. The floor on prices has simply been raised.
So the advice to book your summer and holiday flights right now, today, isn't just a travel agent scare tactic to get a commission.
No, not at all.
That is a harsh economic reality.
It is. The old rules still apply to standard off-peak travel on a random Tuesday in February, but for high-demand seasons in a high-inflation environment, the early bird truly gets the worm.
Okay, so the floor is rising, the rules are shifting, and my blood pressure is definitely going up.
Take a breath.
We absolutely owe you, the listener, a practical toolkit. How do you actually execute all of this without sitting at your computer hitting refresh until 3 a.m.?
The ultimate key is automation. You should never, ever be doing the manual labor that a piece of software can do for you for free.
The guide recommends using tools like Google Flights and the Hopper app to track specific routes. How do those actually work behind the scenes?
They are predictive modeling tools. They basically scrape massive databases of historical API data from the airlines. You put in your dates, and it analyzes millions of past flights to predict the price trajectory.
So it does the guessing for you.
Literally, it sends you a push notification when the prices dip into that optimal statistical range.
And for the really wild, spontaneous flash sales, the sources suggest a service called Dollar Flight Club.
Yes, that's a good one.
From what I understand, that's basically a bot that scrapes the global distribution systems looking for pricing errors or sudden unannounced route drops by the airlines, and it emails you when a flight to Paris accidentally drops to $300.
That is exactly correct. But beyond just relying on apps, there is a powerful regulatory hack built into the system that travelers need to use.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
The 24-hour rule.
This is a lifesaver. I cannot tell you how many times I have found a great fare, texted my spouse to see if we can get the Friday off work, and by the time they text back an hour later, the flight has jumped $200. This rule pauses that clock.
It is perhaps the most underutilized tool in the traveler's arsenal.
The Department of Transportation actually mandates that airlines offer free cancellation within 24 hours of booking, provided you are booking at least a week in advance.
Right.
This allows you to lock in a price immediately the second you see a good deal. It is exactly like putting a highly sought-after item on hold at a retail store. You secure the asset, the cheap ticket, and you give yourself a 24-hour grace period to text your friends, check with your boss, secure your PTO, and finalize your plans with absolutely zero financial risk.
It completely neutralizes the anxiety of the purchase. And it ties directly into the most powerful tool you have against these rising 2026 fuel prices flexibility.
Because you can test things out.
Right. If you can be flexible with your dates or fly out of a slightly different airport, you can combine that flexibility with the 24-hour hold to rigorously test different pricing scenarios without committing a single dollar.
Now let's talk about the hoarders out there.
The points hoarders.
The listeners who have been sitting on 100,000 credit card points waiting for the perfect trip. Does any of this timing apply to them? Because the sources point out that for award bookings, the rules completely flip.
They really do.
The best availability is either 10 to 11 months out, like the exact moment the schedule's open, or in the final weeks before departure.
This raises an important question about how airlines view their own currency. When you pay with cash, you are subject to that yield management curve we discussed earlier. They want to maximize your dollars. But award seats are treated as a literal liability on the airline's balance sheet.
Wait, explain that. Why a liability?
Because unredeemed miles represent a service the airline owes you. So to clear that debt, they release a handful of award seats a full year in advance to satisfy their loyalty members.
Okay.
Once those 2 or 3 seats are gone, they lock the system down. They want cash for the rest of the plane. They only open up more award seats at the very last minute when the algorithm is absolutely certain they cannot sell that seat for cash.
So you are no longer timing the algorithm. You're essentially waiting for the airline to admit defeat on selling a cash ticket.
Entirely. You are playing a waiting game of attrition with the airline's confidence.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring it all together for you. If you want to beat the system in 2026, aim for that 1 to 3 month Goldilocks window for domestic flights.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to take advantage of the new data pointing to Friday deals alongside the historical Tuesday and Wednesday sweet spots. Use your automation tools so you aren't doing the heavy lifting. Put flights on hold with a 24-hour rule to save your sanity. And crucially, if you are traveling for the 2026 holidays, get those flights booked by Halloween before the 19% fuel spike drives fares completely out of reach.
It is really about combining the historical algorithms with a sharp awareness of the current economic climate.
Exactly.
But there is one final, larger implication here that builds on what we just discussed regarding points and miles.
Okay, what is that?
Since award flight availability spikes at the two extremes 10 to 11 months out, or at the very last minute, and airlines are relying more heavily on dynamic pricing to combat these massive 2026 fuel costs, could we soon see a future where cash flights mimic award flights entirely? Right. Imagine a system where the Goldilocks window vanishes completely. It is replaced by a dual extreme model. You either buy a year in advance to guarantee a seat at a fixed premium rate, or you wait and gamble on the final 48 hours to sweep up the unsold inventory.
If we're moving toward a dual extreme model, you have to wonder if the concept of spontaneous middle-class travel is going to disappear entirely. Will flying in the 2030s become something you only do if you meticulously planned it a year ago, or if you're wealthy enough to just not care about the last-minute surge pricing?
It's a real possibility.
Next time you hit that buy button, remember you are playing against a highly sophisticated algorithm. But armed with this data, you finally know the rules of the house. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Use this knowledge, hack your next vacation, and we'll see you next time.